Net zero and forestry. I think the main thing I want to talk about today is this sort of the role of forestry and the role of woodlot owners in this newfangled carbon economy, which is kind of all the rave now. I took this photo. This is from my parents' woodlot out in Stanley Bridge, and it's kind of I hope you'll pardon this sort of sappy metaphor, but I really do think that we are kind of at the dawn of a new era in forestry and woodlot management. And I guess sort of to speak about this being a dawn, I guess we want to talk part of my talk is going to be a little bit of a history. So where are we now? How did we get here? And where are we going to go in the near future? I had to give a little bit of my punchline away here, but I have my own little history here. And as I mentioned, I go way back on this with Barry Murray. I think Barry helped me stitch a few of those patches on my sash there as a young Cub Scout. Plucky young fellow out looking to do good in the world. And this is an example of what happens when you spend too much time alone in the woods after 7 years of graduate school and counting a few too many tree rings in a forestry lab in Eastern Europe. So there is such a thing as too much time alone in the woods. Anyways, extremely proud to be at this point in my journey here in forestry. And anyways, don't let anyone ever tell you that life ain't long. This being us being sort of at a new point in kind of environmental ethics or environmental thinking and resource use, I just thought I'd take a little trip down, go over the history, I guess, of environmentalism and bringing us up to this current point. The thoughts of environmental sustainability go back as far as resource use, and there's old fables of indigenous people about not going to the well too many times. But I guess in our kind of modern era, modern literary era of environmental ethics, some people go back to transcendentalism, so transcendence being the key word there. Henry David Thoreau, I'm sure lots of people are familiar with his work. He kind of retreated to Walden Pond, and the transcendentalists were sort of kind of talking about resource use in an era of rapid industrialization, and going back to the core and thinking almost thinking in very religious terms that the essence of nature and humanity is pure, is inherently good, and that essentially industrialization and working for money is sort of this corrupting influence. So that time spent in nature is just inherently good, and it's something that people should do, and it's virtuous. It brings you closer to sort of a religious spirit. So that's sort of an early perspective on environmentalism, and that's in the Romantic era. So you can tell it kind of sounds pretty romantic. And then we kind of get a little bit more technical about things. I'm sure people are familiar with Aldo Leopold. This is sort of the beginning of what you might call like the modern conservation movement. And this was, I think Leopold was trying to inspire resource managers, and talking about this concept of ecological integrity. That was sort of a landmark phrase that was propagated from Leopold's work. This kind of vague concept of ecosystem wholeness, or maybe thinking a little bit more about what actually makes a forest beyond just there being a bunch of trees there, and that this is sort of a nice phrase that I think I like to keep in the back of my mind on intelligent tinkering. So to keep every cog and wheel is the first precaution of intelligent tinkering. So you're going to start mucking around with things, just don't lose any of the little pieces. So I think just a certain wisdom to carry forward there as we start. Forest management does involve doing that. It's experimental. We're augmenting things, but that obviously there's value in sort of aspiring to maintain the essence of the systems that we're managing. And just contemporaries of Leopold would have been like Theodore Roosevelt. This is a photograph of him being on a tour of Yosemite Park with John Muir. And this was sort of this notion of ecosystem wholeness being sort of shown directly to the highest levels of government, saying there's something about these places which must be preserved in its entirety. So this is in Yosemite Park, in this era of Western expansion, colonization, and that environmental ethic gave rise to what we now just call national parks. So this is kind of applied philosophy here. Moving forward another 50 years, we're getting into what we're sort of more familiar with now. You might call it popular environmentalism. So the notion of an environmental ethic which is not just spoken among resource managers, but actually is a popular issue. It's a political issue. Everybody sort of gets a say on that. A foundational voice in this movement was Rachel Carson. She wrote high impact analysis on the downstream effects of pesticides, called Silent Spring. And this is going deeper than just a resource management argument, but a moral argument, stating that I think whenever scarce resources are on the line and you're talking about juggling assets and production, we often default to the economic bottom line as the basis of our decision making. But this was a book that became very popular because it just said that economic bottom line is not good enough. It's not aspirational enough, and that we should, we can't having things like streams with no dragonflies because DDT is a cost-effective way to maintain agricultural productivity. Is just there's more to it than that, and this is kind of that argument I think is pretty central to like contemporary discourse on how we manage ecosystems, because it puts, especially in the situation here on PEI, where we are in 80% of our forests are privately owned, and people are needing to get a return on that. So it does put people in a tricky situation. But this sort of popular environmentalism is it's really present. We hear about it more and more now with climate change being one of our most important political issues. So we have events like COP26 and maybe some people not being so impressed with the rapidity of action which is being taken, and some not so polite reviews of actions being taken there. I think Ole just showed up here, and he got his jabs in on the net zero initiative. So we hear that loud and clear, and we're really looking to get some rubber hitting the road here, because there is it's just been this issue which has just been talked about, but now I like to think that we're getting some traction here. We're getting some projects on the road. So I actually was fortunate enough to be sent to COP26 this last autumn, and I think there was a general sense of disappointment in the kind of political conclusions that came out of there. With it's a pretty difficult thing. You got to get almost 200 countries to sign unanimously on agreement on how they're going to mitigate their CO2 emissions and get off of cheap energy and replace cheap energy replace one source of very cheap energy with the diversity of more expensive types of energy. It's not easy to get 200 countries to agree on that. But they even saved a spot for us there, the local governments and municipal authorities. And after you got the little background on me for my bio there, but I have to say, after living off of Prince Edward Island for the better part of 15 years, to come back and through this twist of fate end up working on a climate change strategy for Prince Edward Island, and for them to have a seat saved for me at COP26, I got to tell you, that was a pretty proud moment of my life to be representing Prince Edward Island there. But barring the low impact kind of news coverage of the sort of political agreements, I think that I left feeling incredibly inspired by the sort of internal discussions that were going on between people who have been working in climate change for decades, right? their career has been focused on solving this problem, and you get 30,000 people together in a room who have been working on climate change for 10 or more years. I mean, some pretty good ideas come out of that. So I think this is kind of where I might get to. I think my read on that is that before and after that conference, or after that conference, I think the conversation around marketing that whatever it is, the je ne sais quoi of a more inspired type of ecosystem management, where we're actually thinking about the distributed benefits of a more holistic approach to resource management. We're launching now into this new era of environmentalism, where actually that's actually a marketable service. So it's not just a private landowner doing what's good because they ought to, but now actually going above and beyond that economic bottom line entitles you to participate in a new industry as a service provider. So we're going from that sort of moralistic stance of kind of the popular environmentalism that we're familiar with. We're actually transitioning into what I read as more of like an ultra-capitalistic perspective on resource management, strong emphasis on natural capital, and where we cease just treating the impacts of our resource management as externalities, and we actually quantify that. And really talking about CO2 production is very much in the same type of phrasing that we just talked about waste management, garbage production, and you got to pay for garbage production, you got to pay for waste management, you got to pay for CO2 reduction. I think a really useful implement to start thinking about that mercantilization of environmental goodwill is this idea of the green premium. So you sort of have your business as usual model, which is you're going to be your high profit scenario with minimal consideration towards societal or environmental goodwill, just your own economic bottom line. And you compare that to the scenario where you are providing some distributed public good. Here's an example of green cement production. So you have this green premium is kind of this catchphrase coined by Bill Gates with this breakthrough energy initiative, where they're trying to come up with ways to channel revenue generated by polluters into making the green alternatives more cost effective. So you have a ton of your regular old cement, and then you have your ton of cement, which actually absorbs CO2 as it cures. That special product is more than twice as expensive. So you have that green premium of, in this case, 140%, but that this actually sort of starts giving us, if this is what it costs to sequester that ton of CO2, then all of a sudden we transition from a perspective where it's like, well, now, I mean, forest carbon credits have kind of been a racket, and people are kind of paying for that, what people are willing to sell out for. But this is how we actually start making that a little bit more of a business proposal, because we're actually able to assign dollar values to what it costs to get that CO2 out of the atmosphere. So this translates, I think, pretty intuitively to forestry, because forests are our most potent sink for carbon dioxide. Barring high-tech solutions where it's really handy to have an underground volcano nearby to provide infinite renewable energy so that you can suck CO2 out of the atmosphere at a high energetic cost, forests are providing the main thrust of carbon dioxide removal. And here on Prince Edward Island, where we've stated that we have a more ambitious net zero objective, 2040, as opposed to most other places are 2050, it does put immense pressure on us to increase our carbon sequestration. There's only people can only decarbonize their lives at such a rate before it just becomes unsustainable. It's unviable. We can't expect everybody to go out and buy an electric car in the next couple of years. So without causing undue social stress, I mean, it really just puts immense pressure on us to take care of our forests and to get our forests onto carbon projects. And that with climate change mitigation now being a fairly mainstreamed industry, that woodlot owners can now think of themselves as service providers in the most rapidly growing industry on Earth. There's huge upside for private woodlot owners, especially here on Prince Edward Island, and you maximize access to that upside. We're going to maximize access to that upside through collective private action. And that kind of touches back on that green premium issue, because here right now, the baseline is we have very little, we're very limited in our intervention on forest management here on Prince Edward Island. So that limited intervention essentially states that economic baseline is very low. So if that baseline remains low, then that suggests that the upside is maximized. But as soon as we start introducing policies which stipulate, if we were to, and we don't want to, because I hope that the private sector rises to this challenge and takes advantage of this high leverage situation. But if we were to increase regulation of how we manage forests on PEI, then all of a sudden that starts chewing into the upside for forest carbon projects. So by people banding together and collectively acting as service providers, that's how woodlot owners are going to maximize their upside in this new economy. That's the notion of additivity. So you can only sell the carbon credits which are additive, which you've gone above and beyond, and that's your profit margin there. So how does the PEI Woodlot Owners Association get involved in net zero? So there is a pillar in net zero which is kind of explicitly about innovation in our forest product sector, and there's ample room for everybody to get involved in that. We're going to be making, to bring up the clean tech park again, I hope that there's going to be plenty of businesses crop up there which are going to do innovative things with forest products. But I also think there's a huge opportunity for the Woodlot Owners Association to get involved in this Pillar 6, which is how do we get people to start thinking more optimistically about the added cost of climate change mitigation. I think people love the idea of increasing efficiency, but unfortunately, this, like waste management, this all comes at a cost, right? People have to pay for this. People have to pay, we released energy to get the money out of fossil fuels, and now we're going to have to invest money and energy to get all that waste back into a safe situation. But it's a challenge to rise to, and I think that's kind of I think it's pretty inspiring to have lofty challenges like that. I think back to times whenever I think we rose to challenges like in the 50s let's say in the 50s, non-war time, where like infrastructure and innovation was really believed to be the sort of the engine of economic growth. And I think we've sort of slowly peeled away from that to now it's pretty much just, the most profitable thing to do is just kind of exchange in esoteric financial products. So I think this is, to me, this is, and it is inspiring. I think it's not, I think we're on a good track. I don't think we want to fall subject to this kind of doom and gloom where it's like it's too late. I really don't think it's too late. I think the right actions are being taken right now, and we're on a good road. If we address the situation, I think everything is going to be good. But the agencies like the Woodlot Owners Association can really get involved in getting the word out there, decentralizing this task, because decentralization I think is going to be essential to pulling this off on PEI. Inspiring a culture of woodlot ownership, because we want to be rearranging things so that there is maximum upside for woodlot ownership. And promoting this notion that the upside is going to be maximized if we band together as private entities. Here's an example of how that might be pulled off. These are some forestry projects that I went out on a really inspiring tour with Barry and Thomas to Malpeque. Got a tour of these community forest projects which are budding up in Malpeque, kind of coordinated by a friend of mine, Matthew Ramsey. And these are a community forest project is just a collection of woodlots in an area where right now there's really limited litigious or overhead on this, but as soon as we see clusters of owners sort of acting together and assigning, like the value, there's immediate value to this as sort of a bounded area of high priority forest. And I can just see if we can kind of formalize something like community forest projects into something that is just a very favorable arrangement for us as a province to be dealing with clusters of woodlots. And I mean, I think the value of this is already kind of coming to the surface, because there is, I mean, what the priority here is just to get sort of first right of refusal on a woodlot, which is a member of this kind of collection of woodlots that needs to get out of that arrangement. They need to sell the property to make some money. That we just kind of get ahead of this woodlot kind of going on market, and then even there are even instruments for the province to get involved and snatch those up if the community forest project can't get involved that fast. So I think it's kind of blue sky where community forest projects could go in the short term, but I think that there is a lot of there's a lot of room for creativity, and this is just on that pillar 6 where we really want to be inspiring communities to take hold and make their own actions on this. I think that there will be huge advantages to getting sort of localities to start bounding their woodlots into these community forest projects, and I think the sky's the limit with these, because I think it's a very favorable. That's how woodlot owners are going to maximize their leverage in this situation as service providers, and I think that if we can get the PEI Woodlot Owners Association to start forming these across Prince Edward Island, that is going to be a good situation, with a lot of room for creativity of what these things can actually achieve. I think there's lots of other stuff we could theoretically talk about, but I don't want to complicate things with like 100 examples. But I just think that this is something that I went and saw, and I just thought I immediately saw the benefit of this. So I think if we can get community forest projects on the go, good. So I'll just leave you that's my overview of this new dawn of a new era of environmentalism, where I think we're actually now recognizing the huge value that intact ecosystems provide to the society as a whole. And I hope that we can really pull together and maximize the benefit for woodlot owners on Prince Edward Island. So, because I think that's really what's going to play a huge role in solving our forestry issues. Thank you very much for your attention, and I guess we're going to do questions after everybody's going to talk, and then. Oh, right now. Great. Yeah, I'd love to take your questions if I muddied the waters enough for you.
Thank you, John. Excellent opportunity to be informed as to what's happening at the provincial level, so we appreciate John making that presentation, and we're definitely open for questions. Start with John back here.
So just to take it a little, so you've got a community, they're all together on carbon, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it go from there?
Well, I guess the first step, which would be beneficial to clustering like this, is that there's actually quite forest carbon credits aren't like a huge moneymaker for woodlot owners, but they're definitely a rebate of like appreciable value. I mean, but accessing that, there is quite a bit of administrative overhead to the verification and auditing, and there's a lot of parties involved. So the benefit there, the first-hand benefit is just being able to distribute that administrative cost over larger projects. So that's the most that's the first thing which comes to mind. It's cost reduction in terms of accessing that revenue. So I think if we start seeing these become more popular, then I think. I think that we can, because for example, it could be the case that how is this forest carbon market taking shape? Well, I mean, we want it to be as competitive as possible, right? So that actually the value of carbon reflects, its true value, and the province needs to keep those credits here, right? So I think that these. The province is probably going to be a customer for forest carbon credit projects, and that if I can see there being some arrangement between community forest projects where that revenue would essentially be channeled right into right into the development of trails or campsites or whatever was helping the forest project realize some revenue stream. I mean, or with help with financing or just streamlining things in that regard. So I think I do think that it's not. It's really not written like where these forest projects could go or what the function of them could be, but it's just going to be advantageous for us to be dealing with a smaller number of larger groups. It's just going to have the biggest advantage.
So basically, you got a lot of numbers, so then carbon goes, say, to the provincial government?
We would purchase theoretically we would purchase that. I mean, I hope hopefully that
the revenue comes back to the landowner?
Yeah. I mean, you want to be thinking of this as like selling wood chips or logs, or I mean, it's another product that you guys are going to be positioned to produce, but it's going to be difficult for single woodlot owners to swallow the administrative cost for participating in that.
Would it be an annual thing?
Possibly, or yeah. I mean, that's an option too. That would be a discussion between the woodlot owner and some type of project developer. But that's you guys are going to be able, like a woodlot owner is going to be able to deal with a project developer. Then you're going to essentially be appraised for how much carbon you have to sell, and then it's the woodlot owner's option to hold or sell or decide at what rate you want to cash those in. I mean, you might want to wait. You know, it's a commodity at that point.
So basically, John, just to extend it, if there were 10 woodlot owners in an approximate area, members of our association, and they wanted to form it's kind of like a cooperative, right?
Yep.
And they wanted to, then the administrative work would need to be done by, let's say, the PEI Woodlot owner group. Is that what you're saying? And then they in turn would be able to manage the project.
That's an option.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Somebody has to manage it, right?
well, I guess I would sort of see these community forest projects. Yeah, they would have sort of a local representative,
Yes.
and then there would probably be some type of hierarchical structure where those community forests would then be sort of ideally be under the umbrella of some other kind of more encompassing institution, which would then probably be dealing with one-on-one with the province. So that's just how you're going to get the best bang for buck for distributing those administrative costs over. And then I hopefully, I mean, now I'm sort of speaking in optimistic terms here, but that we could, because right now for the way forest carbon project development usually goes is it's kind of a one and done. You have a large forest project bounded, and then that gets appraised, and then the project developer deals with verifiers and brokers to get a fixed pool of credits to someone who needs them. A good situation would be a good outcome would be where we could have more of a rolling recruitment mechanism where we wouldn't have to have that all established at the outset, but that smaller operations could sort of recruit into the program at a more sort of like the forest enhancement program. You can just get on that whenever you once you get your consultation done and you get your woodlot your management plan in.
Sure. All right, questions answered. Awesome. Okay. All right, John, we really appreciate the information, and we're looking forward to a lot of discussion. And
I appreciate the invitation. It was really a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.